Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and absolutely crucial tension at the heart of the modern world. How exactly does a massive, multi-billion-dollar industry strike a balance between developing life-saving medical treatments and, maximizing profits for its shareholders? It's a constant tightrope walk, and the stakes literally could not be higher.
So you might be wondering, how do you put a price tag on corporate ethics? We usually think of ethics as this entirely abstract thing, right? Just a philosophical matter of right and wrong. But in the pharmaceutical industry, ethical breaches aren't just PR nightmares. No way. They are massive, quantifiable reputational and regulatory risks that directly hit a company's financial bottom line.
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand how investors and analysts actually measure these abstract ethical issues as material financial risks, we rely on the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board framework, or SASB standards for short. Specifically, we're looking at their Biotechnology and Pharmaceutical standard. This is the internationally recognized tool used to track exactly how well these companies manage that super delicate tension between profit and patient care.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The pricing tightrope. 2. The marketing minefield. And 3. The cost of corruption.
Let's start right off with Section 1, the pricing tightrope, balancing profit and access. In recent years, pharma companies have faced some intense downward pricing pressures, mainly because stakeholders globally are laser-focused on containing healthcare costs. So if a company just randomly jacks up its prices, they risk immense regulatory action and public scrutiny. To track this fairly, we can't just look at a single price tag. The standard explicitly differentiates between the list price, which is essentially the sticker price or wholesale acquisition cost, and the net price. The net price is what actually remains after all those complex, behind-the-scenes rebates, discounts, and returns are factored in. Understanding this difference is absolutely crucial because it stops companies from using crazy rebate structures to quietly mask what the drug actually costs the healthcare system.
So how do we actually track this? Well, to properly measure affordability and pricing risks, companies have to disclose the percentage change in both their weighted average list price and their net price across their entire global portfolio. But wait, they don't stop there. Since portfolio averages can easily hide extreme outliers, the framework forces entities to identify the single product with the largest price increase and disclose its specific price jump. It basically acts as a financial lie detector. It shows us exactly which products are leaning heavily on price hikes rather than actual scientific innovation to drive revenue, which, might be a big red flag that a company's research and development pipeline is drying up.
Next up is our second pillar, the marketing minefield, the risks of off-label promotion. Once a drug is priced to balance profit and access, how is it ethically sold to the public? Well, this brings us to what I call the cost. Direct-to-consumer advertisements for prescription drugs are a wildly powerful way to boost market share. That's just a business reality. But if that marketing involves misleading claims or promotes off-label uses, which means prescribing a drug for conditions regulators haven't actually approved, the financial backlash is severe. The standard specifically tracks the total amount of monetary losses resulting from legal proceedings tied to false marketing claims. We aren't talking about tiny slap-on-the-wrist fines here. We are talking about massive, quantifiable civil and criminal judgments.
It's basically a timeline of accountability. It all starts with that initial off-label promotion. That eventually triggers legal proceedings, anything from regulatory penalties to straight-up criminal actions brought by governments. And that inevitably leads to those hard monetary losses we just mentioned. But step 4 is absolutely critical here: corrective actions. Entities don't just write a check and move on. They are required to disclose the exact corrective actions they've taken in response. That could mean sweeping management changes, adjusting their business processes, or rolling out entirely new training protocols. Obviously, to prevent ever reaching that incredibly costly legal stage, pharmaceutical entities need a rigorous code of ethics governing off-label promotion. But let's be real, words on a page aren't going to satisfy investors. Companies actually have to disclose the specific mechanisms they use to police their own ethics. We're talking clear disciplinary actions for violations, rigorous internal audits, independent regulatory review committees, and comprehensive training programs. It's all about proving whether a company is actively preventing violations or just crossing their fingers and hoping they don't get caught. Which brings us to our third and final section, the cost of corruption, global business practices. When we're dealing with global laws around bribery, corruption, and healthcare fraud, the most crucial thing is understanding exactly who a company is interacting with. When someone says anti-bribery, we usually just picture a drug rep handing something to a doctor in a clinic.
But actually, scratch that. Consider how broad the definition of healthcare professionals is under the standard. It goes way beyond just physicians. It includes purchasing agents, practice managers, and group purchasing organizations. Basically, anyone who has the power to purchase, lease, or recommend a pharmaceutical product is a potential target for inappropriate influence. So interactions with all of these individuals have to be strictly governed by the company's code of ethics.
And boom, here is the cost again. Just like with off-label marketing, the financial penalty for bribery and corruption is tracked the exact same way. It's reported as the total amount of monetary losses resulting from legal proceedings. This forces companies to put their ethical failures right there on the balance sheet as a direct material loss. It completely strips away the public relations spin and shows analysts exactly how much a company's unethical business practices are bleeding their bottom line.
To prevent these staggering financial hits, companies must disclose the specifics of their ethics codes regarding all these interactions. And it's not just about stopping briefcases full of cash and dark alleys. The framework targets everyday mundane temptations. It sets strict boundaries around food and entertainment, how training and education are provided, and how companies participate in formulary committees. Those are the groups that decide which drugs get covered by insurance. The whole point is to make sure a lavish steak dinner or an all-expenses-paid speaking gig in a tropical location doesn't unknowingly compromise a medical professional's judgment.
Finally, let's wrap up with measuring the intangible, financial impact of ethics.
So what does this all mean? Throughout this explainer, we've seen a very clear pattern. Whether it's masking aggressive price hikes on life-saving medicine, making misleading marketing claims, or improperly influencing a purchasing manager, ethical breaches in pharma are not just theoretical problems. Through the lens of the SASB framework, we can clearly see that they are quantifiable, material financial risks that cost companies millions, if not billions, in fines and lost market trust. Which leaves us with one final, pretty heavy thought to ponder. We've seen how tracking prices, marketing penalties, and corruption fines brings everything out into the light. But does transparency ultimately cure the tension between profit and patient care? Or does it just put a precise, predictable price tag on the cost of doing business? It's a complex, highly provocative question, and one that will absolutely continue to define the future of pharmaceutical accountability. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gave you some valuable insight into the actual mechanics of medical ethics. Catch you next time.